We're getting a new window into just how extensive the government's use is of paid informants, and also just how many crimes
it's wild.
These taxpayer-funded informants are authorized to commit. Let's throw this Ken Vogel tweet up on the screen. This is actually from a report that was in Forbes. Federal agencies paid $294 million to confidential informants. That was from 2011 to 2018. The DEA paid an Amtrak employee $963,000, which the IG called a substantial waste of government funds. Oh, you think? In addition, this was maybe the part that was most stunning to me. The FBI authorized informants to commit 22,823 different crimes.
In just 4 years, between 2011 and 2014.
As part of their work. And I mean, this really gets to some of the questions that we've raised on this show about the overuse of informants, how oftentimes the incentive for the government and for these informants is to create crime that they can be involved then in quote unquote disrupting acts that may never have been plotted or executed on if you didn't have government agents involved every step of the way saying, hey, you should do this and let me help you and let me push you and why don't we make it a bigger plot? Why? Why are the incentives in place? First of all, sometimes these informants, they only get paid if they're out there, helping to foment crime. But in addition, from the government's perspective, a lot of times the actors involved, they get to have the big press conference, political careers are made over big high-profile terror plot disruptions and those sorts of things. So their incentive also is to help foment plots that then they can, with much fanfare, disrupt. So the numbers here, ultimately, in just a few years, are pretty stunning to look at.
And what's funny is that because this is a non-political report, they point to the Gretchen Whitmer plot and January 6th as areas where we have seen government informants who have been authorized to commit crimes, or at the very least have not been charged because of their role in the actual crime itself, and then reporting it to the higher ups and possibly testifying, providing evidence, and all of that. So we know that in some cases, these people are confidential informants who are not getting paid. And in many cases, though, they're getting paid a lot, like a lot of money. An airline employee, $500,000. Amtrak, $1 million. DEA is paying an average $26,000 over a 5-year period, which, it's not that much money, but it's also not nothing. So you're seeing here hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on these informants and 22,000 crimes, which, once again, according to their law, it's actually kind of crazy. They're allowed to authorize people to commit crimes as long as they're reporting on other crimes. And look, I get it. It's complicated. Sometimes you need that. But there's not a lot of oversight here. The fact is that this didn't even come from an IG report. It came from a bunch of guys who had to go through the federal court system and compile as much of the data. The government hasn't released any of the data as recently. 22,000 crimes in 4 years. I mean, what's that on average? Something like, look, that's like 6,000 crimes a year, something like that, and maybe even higher in recent years. We don't know. There's no data that's really publicly available in terms of recent times. So this stuff is being done in our name. It's a real corruption of the Justice Department.
That is exactly right. They call them otherwise illegal acts, otherwise known as
a crime.
Crimes. And to give you a sense of how much abuse there's been within this program, a court released, I'm reading from this report, a court released testimony of one confidential informant in Atlanta who received $212,000 from the DEA. DEA has so many of these informants, by the way, from 2011 to 2013. She testified she wasn't sure why she was paid. That was her testimony. She also testified to a sexual relationship with the DEA group supervisor who allegedly convinced the subordinates to falsify reports to justify those payments. That case currently under review by the Inspector General. So you have, just zero accountability about how these funds are actually being used, and very little investigation into whether this has actually been effective at preventing more crime than it's creating. And some of the tactics have been wildly abusive of entrapment and of helping create these plots and radicalizing individuals. We covered back on Rising the Herald Square bomber, quote unquote, who didn't subscribe to any sort of radical ideology. The FBI informant who was involved showed him, let me show you Abu Ghraib, let me talk to you about how America's evil, let me encourage you to be involved with this bombing plot. And so it's things like that that you just wonder, like, what exactly is being authorized in our name? What are our taxpayer dollars actually being used for? And so one of the rare glimpses into just the astonishing numbers behind how many of these informants exist, how much they're getting paid, and how much criminal activity they themselves are actually committing.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, guys, enjoy the day. We'll have more for you later.